Hello, hello. How is everybody doing today? Come in, come in. Waiting for you all to join. Prince Ezekiel, what's up, brother? I'm doing good, I'm doing good. Waiting for the others to join. You know, as we wind down for the end of the year, I decided I would like to do a giveaway to show my appreciation to all you guys who've been following the channel, some of you for years now. Just want to show my appreciation that I see you all and I do appreciate. So, today, 4 lucky winners will be able to win a $25 Amazon gift card. So each person will get a $25 Amazon gift card. And if you're located outside the United States, you'll be getting the equivalent of $25 US in your own currency. So if you guys haven't entered the raffle yet, you want to do so because the raffle ends at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So basically in 57 minutes, raffles end and we pick a winner. You can enter as many times as possible. In fact, that's how the winner is chosen. People who complete all the steps, those who put in the effort's gonna win. So if you guys haven't joined the raffle yet, you could do so at this link. I'm gonna post the link right now in the chat. So right here, click on that link, put in your email, and complete all the other rest of the steps. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, Instagram, Facebook, all of what it's asking you to do. But also be sure that you go to your email and confirm your email, because on our end, we can see if the email was confirmed or not. And that's going to be part of the selection process. You got to confirm your email to say that this is a legitimate email, right? We don't want people putting in bogus emails. So enter the submission. Get a chance to win $25 Amazon gift card. That's my Christmas gift to y'all. Wish I could give everyone something, but we know that's not practical. So how's everybody doing today, really, yeah? Wednesday, a few days before Christmas, for those of you who celebrate Christmas. I'm sure if you don't celebrate Christmas, then there's probably something else you'll be celebrating, or just taking the time off to relax, That's good too. In addition to the giveaway, I always like to communicate with you guys, like to chat with y'all. So I'm gonna take some questions today, just sort of open forum, discussion, music, piano. I'm sure you guys always have a lot of questions, and today I want to explain, I want to, clarify some of those questions for you, give some tips, some solution. I won't be on for long. In fact, when the raffle giveaway is over, which it ends at 3 o'clock, that's when I'm going to jump offline, so it's not going to be a long stream. But just wanted to jump on to say hi. Reading some of the comments here. Come in, folks. Come in, folks. And for those who are just joining, again, we're doing a raffle giveaway today to 4 people for a $25 Amazon gift card. So wherever you're located around the world, you'll get an Amazon gift card local to your country, so you don't have to worry about how to use it. If your country has an Amazon system, which I'm guessing most countries do at this point, you could use that $25 however you'd like to. Again, this is just to show my appreciation for you guys' continued support in supporting the channel here at Piano Lesson with Warren. Kaysen says, give us some Christmas tunes. When it comes to Christmas songs, excuse me, they're not usually readily on the top of my head. Like, I don't really sit and play a lot of Christmas songs, and so sometimes I would learn them just to teach them as breakdown, One of my favorites is to Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Ah. I'm just sort of improvising here, messing around. How you guys doing? You entered for the raffle yet? For those who haven't done so, again, here is the link in the chat. Post it one more time. All right, so let's take some questions while we are hanging out for another 40 minutes or so. So as always, what I like to do when I'm doing a live stream is for you guys to start your question with the word questions, because we know there's a lot of dialogue going on in the chat, and it helps me to quickly spot a question opposed to just a random comment, so I can answer it if the word question precedes your question, right? So in bold, just write question, then write your question, and then we'll talk about that stuff. I like to hear from you guys, because the questions you ask gets my brain thinking, and it's also what influenced the type of tutorials that I do on the channel. So for those of you who would like to see other types of tutorials, as long as it stays within the gospel niche, because as you guys know, that's my thing, gospel piano, teaching people to play by ear. So, things got to sit within that realm, So let's hear in the comments. Let's hear your question. Let's hear some stuff that you'd like to see on the channel for 2022. If there's a particular collaboration you'd like me to do, let me know. I'll reach out to that person, see if they're interested in coming on the channel, because you also know I like to do collabs, right? By the way, pardon me if you see me sucking on a mint. That's just to keep the voice, voice has been a little raspy over the past few days, so the mint helps. All right. What questions you guys have for me? So the awesomeness says, how can I apply classical and jazz practice? Well, I'll need you to elaborate on that a little bit more when you say classical and jazz practice. I think I know what you're asking, but I don't want to assume. However, based on my understanding of this limited question, I'll try to give you my feedback. So I think you're asking how you can practice both classical and jazz. And that's something I did for a while. In my early days when I was a student studying music, my major that I was actually studying in college was classical piano. But on the side, I was learning gospel and jazz and all that stuff because I wanted to learn everything. I didn't just limit myself to just gospel or jazz. I wanted to understand music. And that's a good perspective for everyone to approach music. Music is a language. Some of you speak multiple languages, so you understand the concepts of language. And music is no different. It's just language that is auditory. And so when you approach music from the perspective that it's a language, then you realize that the styles don't really matter. Classical, jazz, pop, funk, blues, all of those still fall within the realm of the language. And once you understand the language, you just realize that these different styles and genres are like accents. Just like how someone from Mexico, when they speak English, they have a different accent. Or someone from Ghana, when they speak English, they have a different accent. Someone from the UK, they have a different accent. And so you can find that you have 10 different countries all speaking English, but 10 distinct accents. And that's how genres are like. Once you understand the language, you realize that it's just understanding what make that accent unique and then try to copy that. So that's one of the things I discovered, that, okay, so if I just starting to change the qualities of my chord, things starts to sound more jazzy. Depending on the type of chords I'm using, if I start to use these types of chords, the song starts to sound more bluesy. If I start to use these types of chords, the song starts to sound more neo-soul, R&B. And so once you understand the language, then you start to focus on those intricacies that make the style. right? So when you say how to approach classical and jazz, that's how you want to think about it. What makes classical classical? What makes jazz jazz? Because the musical theory for both styles are going to be similar in a lot of the respects. Just a few things that's different. You know, jazz goes a lot more deep into dissonant harmonies and extended chords. Not so much classical. And then we also look at the perspective is, when we're talking about classicals, we're talking about from the reading perspective, the repertoire perspective, because there's also a lot to classical, different style within classical music. We're talking about Baroque, which is like Bach, Beethoven, well, not Beethoven, like Bach, or classical, which is like Beethoven and Haydn and Mozart. Or we're talking about later, like more romantic, sort of like Franz Liszt, Schumann, you know, all of those guys. So there's different eras even within classical, and the repertoire and interpretation is different as well. But it's a big task, which is why I no longer do classical. It's just after a while, got to a point where it's just become too much to try to juggle both styles. But if you're interested in both, definitely pursue both. Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. All right. Make sure, again, y'all, that you apply for the chance to win a $25 gift card. The link is in the description. All right, let's see what other questions we have here. So Music Pro School says, or rather is asking, what other scales can one play alongside from? Not quite sure I understand that question. What other scales can one play alongside from? So that question sounds a little bit incomplete. But if you're wondering what other scales you can learn, here are my top list of scales that every pianist should learn. Regardless of whatever style of music you're interested in learning, it's important to learn these scales. Top of the list is the major scales. You want to know your major scales inside out. 4 octaves up and down, hands together. You got to know your major scales, because 90% of the songs you're going to be playing, most likely is going to be major keys. A lot of the runs you see me do some of the times, they're all just major scale runs. So that's why the major scale is important. Right beyond the major scales is the minor scales. Got to know your minor scales. Now, because a song can be either in a major tonality or a minor tonality. That's it, especially in Western music. So that's why the minor scale is right behind the major scales, equally as important. Now, there are 3 types of minor scales, as most of you probably know. Natural minor, harmonic minor, melodic minor. You got to know all 3. They're very similar. So once you learn one of them, it's not going to take you that long to learn the other 2. But it's important to know all 3 forms of the minor scales. Now, once you learn the major and the minor, spot number 3 is kind of a tie between either the blues scale or the pentatonic scale. You can approach either one, but in the end, you need to learn both. Blues scales, what give us that bluesy, gospely stuff. So the blues scale, you want to get that kind of sound, got to know the blues scale. And the pentatonic scale, right? Which is just a 5-note scale. So when you see me playing and I'm doing stuff like, that's all pentatonic scale. So those are the 4 top scales. Once you learn those 4 scales, you're going to realize that a lot of the runs that you hear in music, you're going to be able to quickly decipher it and play it, because it's going to be a combination of those. Now, for those of you who already know those 4, major, minor, blues, pentatonic, the 5th sets of scales, and I say sets of scales because it's going to be more than one, to start looking into is what we call the modes, right? Oftentimes referred to as the church modes in classical music, but also in jazz, we just call them the modes, and those are the scales derived from the major scale. So we have the C major, then we have the Dorian, Lydian, Phrygian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, which is the same thing as the natural minor scale. So you're going to cover that when you learn minor scales anyway. And then the Locrian, which is the 7th degree of the major scale. Now, if you're wondering, if you never know anything about modes, never heard about modes, I got a tutorial right here on YouTube that talk about modes. So just search modes, piano lesson with Warren, and you'll see a video come up. But it's important to know your modes and know them in all 12 keys. Or the way I like to approach modes is they are derived from a parent major scale. So I just play you the modes derived from C. But you need to know the modes derived from E flat major. So I can say the F Dorian comes from the E flat major scale. So you got to know your modes. And then the 6th batch of scales to learn is the modes derived from the minor scale. This is where we get into straight jazz territory. So when you hear a lot of the jazz guys talking about these scales, double harmonic minor, Phrygian dominant, Locrian sharp this, Lydian sharp that, all of those modes or scales, they're modes derived from the minor scales. So those are like the last sets of scales that you can focus on. And then after that, you have some few other exotic scales like the diminished scales and the octatonic scale and stuff like that. But that's just sort of the order I always recommend folks to learn their scales in terms of order of importance. Major, minor, blues, pentatonic, major scale modes, minor scale modes, and then you can look on any other exotic scales, because there are really a lot of scales out there. You don't need to learn all of them. But if you want to be an insane piano player who can improvise and do all kind of crazy runs over chords, you kind of have to know those scales. All right, let's go down the line, see what else we have. Okay. Delano says, what is the type of scales? Well, I think that kind of falls under the question I just answered, Delano. Luke says, the screen just skipped on me. Here we go. Luke says, sometimes when you're scrolling, the screen just skipped. Okay, here it is. Luke says, can you please help me with tritone substitution and diminished passing? Well, Luke, or is it Luke's? Maybe you're new to this channel, but I do have more than one tutorials that go really deep on tritone substitutions and diminished passing. It'd probably be easier for you to watch those tutorials than for me to go into it here, because those are fairly big concepts. I would have to use the rest of the live stream to dive into something like that. So this is one of those questions that I would say, type in tritone substitution, piano lesson with Warren, you'll see a lot of videos on that. Or diminished passing, piano lesson with Warren, because I do have quite a bit of tutorials that demonstrate those concepts. Good. Keyson Music Academy says, I'm a Nigerian music YouTuber. I want a collaboration. How do I go about it? Well, it depends. Because honestly, I don't just do collaboration with everybody like that. Right? So it depends. I would need to see what your channel is all about and if it's a good fit. Because I only like to collaborate with people if it's a good fit for my audience. Right? Not just every YouTuber. which is why there's only a certain folks you see me bring on the channel. Music Pro School says, apart from the major scale, what other scales can I use, especially when I'm playing? Okay, definitely answered that question in my previous rant, so to speak. Kevin, what's up, Mr. Davis? Good of you to join us. Kevin says, will you release a tutorial on The Battle Is Not Yours? I think I actually have a few free tutorial on YouTube with that. He said, you know, I know you've done it, but it's not a lesson. I'll probably see if I can get find that video again and add it into the courses on the website instead of me redoing the same thing. Because I think it's pretty detailed what I did, but it's been so long. I'll need to go find the files and the MIDI, you know, and get it transcribed into score and all of that. Great question. And from Alan says, how can I fully understand the 2-5-1 passing chord? Well, to fully understand the 2-5-1 passing, there are two requirements. One, the first one I'm going to ask you is, are you at the level where you should be studying passing chords? And the reason why I ask that is because some people are beginner, but they hear people talk about these passing chords in 2-5-1. Sounds like a cool concept, definitely sound cool when you apply it in songs. And they go, ooh, I want to know that. But the thing is, learning music is no different than learning math, English, or any other subject. You got to learn things in a structured order for it to make sense. Like, we can't have someone say, how do I understand algebra if they barely know how to do, you know, 5th grade math? Or how do I understand calculus, which is a college level math, if I don't understand algebra, and so on? They're stepping stones. Before we can understand certain concepts, we got to make sure that we understand the prerequisite. So, Alan, without knowing your background, without knowing what you know, I can't tell you that this is going to solve your problem. So that's why I'm posing these questions to you. How far along are you in your piano playing? How much do you know about theory? Can you play in all 12 keys? Can you play progression in all 12 keys from memory? Like if I say, play me a 1-6-2-5 in the key of F sharp, go. Can you do it without hesitation? Because those things I call prerequisites. You got to know those things so when we start talking about substituting chords and going outside the key, that you can keep up with understanding what we're talking about. In addition to that, if you already know all of those things that I'm talking about, then I'm going to give you the same recommendation I give my brother above, which is I do have quite a bit of tutorial at this point, right here on YouTube. You don't even have to go to my program yet, that talks about understanding 2-5-1, what it is, how it works, how to easily find it. Excuse me. All right, Alan? At this point, I have, I don't know, over 500 videos right here on YouTube. So if you guys, and I try to structure those videos in skill level, beginner, intermediate, advanced. Everything to do with passing chords, licks, run, improvisation, substitution, all of that stuff is going to be available in the advanced portion of the playlist of the tutorials. So I'd recommend for those of you guys who are looking for more of that advanced concept, dive into those advanced tutorials in the advanced playlist. And you'd be surprised the wealth of information that's already there. Good stuff though, great question. For those of you who are just joining the chat, again, this is our Christmas giveaway. 4 people going to win a $25 Amazon gift card. Each person going to win an Amazon gift card today. And if you say, how do I enter? I'm posting the link in the chat right now. You just click that link and follow the instructions. The more entries, better your chance of winning. And this is just my way to say thank you guys for an amazing 2021 as we look forward for even more amazing 2022. This is my way of giving back to you. So make sure that you enter for a chance to win. All right? And the raffle for this ends at 3 o'clock today, Eastern Standard Time, which is 29 minutes from now. So if you haven't submitted, submit. $25. You could buy yourself something. Question from Agar says, how do you figure out slash chords in songs? So the way you figure out a slash chords, first thing you have to do is identify the bass. It's actually no different in figuring out any other chords. And this is just a general rule when you're transcribing something by ear, chords. The first thing you have to do is figure out the bass. What is the bass note? Well, actually, the first thing you have to do is figure out the key of the song. Once you've identified the key, if you're in the key of C or say in the key of F, all right, now you know the F, you know all your diatonic chords in F. Now for that particular chord that you're going to figure out, you got to identify that bass note. What is that bass note that I'm hearing? You're listening for the lowest instrument, because sometimes a song might not have a bass guitar, but the keyboardist is playing the bass note, or the guitarist. Whatever instrument is playing that lowest note, that's the bass. So for example, if you identify that the bass note is an A, then your next step is to try to listen for the overall quality of the chord. Now, when we talk about qualities of chord, what does that mean? The qualities of chord is it a major chord? Is it a minor chord? Is it a diminished chord? Is it an augmented chord? Is it a major seventh chord? Is it a dominant seventh chord? And this is where things can get tricky, because if you're not able to tell the quality of a chord, then we can't know what's going on. So that's step number, 3? Identify the quality of the chord, because if I hear that the bass line is this, but then I can hear that it's a dominant 7th chord. We'll say, what chord is that? It's a dominant 7th. So then you can start to do what I call some reverse engineering. Then you can say, is it A7? No. Then what other dominant 7th chord would have an A in it? Would have to be D. Or, right? So that's how you can use deductive reasoning to figure out chord. Because the bass note is either going to be a part of the chord, or it's going to be a slash chord. For example, if I hear that the bass line is B flat, but I can hear the overall quality is dominant 7, then I can most likely tell, okay, so this B flat got to belong to the chord, the overall 7th chord. So in this case, it would be a C7 with the B flat and the bass. That's what we call a slash chord, when there's a different bass line than the root of the chord. So you have to identify the bass line and then listen to the overall quality of the chord. And sometimes you just have to match, but always try to link it back to some form of theory, because it's going to make sense theoretically. So that's just a rough idea as to how you could tell if it's a slash chord you're working with. Okay. Let's see if we can take some more questions. So Peter says, please tell me more, as a beginner, how to use the circle of 4th and 5th. So the circle of 4th and 5th, it's more of a, let me see the best way I can put this. It's not a usage thing, so to speak. It's a way to explain the natural tendency of music. That's what the cycle of 4th and 5th does. It explains to you tendency chords, tendency tones, how music likes to work. So by knowing the circles of 4th and 5th, we can anticipate what's going to happen in a song. So the circles in 4th and 5th simply means if I start on C, going up in perfect 4th, it creates a circle, a loop around, come back to C. So perfect 4th up is B flat, it's F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B, E, A, D, G, back to C. It creates a complete circle. This is how chords work. Now, in Western music, music likes to move in fourths. So that's why a lot of the time after the 1, we go to the 4. If I go to the 2 next, what's the next chord most likely to come after the 2? The 5, because it's following the concept of the cycle of fourth. What usually comes after the 5? The 1. So even though music doesn't just follow fourth, 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 it breaks away, but then it quickly jumps back into that fourth concept. So by knowing the notes of the cycle of fourth and the chords of the cycle of fourth, we can easily anticipate what chord's going to come next. So it's not a matter of how do I use a cycle of fourth, is now that I know the cycle of fourth, it helps me to move with more a firmness, with more clarity through my chord progressions, because I know what usually comes after 5 or what comes after 4. Now, on this very same concept, when we get to more intermediate and advanced level and start to explore the concept of passing chord, we still rely on this concept. Because sometimes when I go to the 4, I oftentimes can then go to the flat 7, then back to the 1, because the flat 7 is just a 4 away from the fourth. So I sometimes can use those chords as passing chords or reharm chords. So we call them sometimes like back doors to get back to another chord. Tritone substitution, all of that, 2-5-1 passing is based on the concept of the cycle of fourth. So the cycle of fourth is simply a way to explain why these chords work, why we can use these chords as passing chords, because they oftentimes fit in the cycle of fourth that lead us back to our destination chord. So it's just a theoretical system that helps us to understand chord movement. That's what the cycle of fifth and fourth is, which is why it's important to know this thing inside and out, right? And if you just take any random song and look at the chords of that song, you're going to see these fourth movements all over the place, right? Good question, Peter. So, Music Pro School says, how do you listen to chords in a song, especially black gospel? So, earlier I talked about understanding music from the concept of language. Music is a language, and then within that language we have accents, different accents. So I like to equate music to the same thing. What we call genres and styles are just different way of expressing that language. So listening to black gospel is no different than listening to a rock song, to a country song, to a reggae song. It's all the same thing. The same devices you'll use when listening to those songs to understand what's happening, it's the same devices we use when listening to black gospel. Now, there are certain chordal movements that are unique to gospel music. Once we understand those signature moves, like, right? Or just certain signature move that you hear all the time in songs. You know, diminish walking, you know. And then certain standardized movements that you hear. Once you learn those phrases, then you'll hear them in song and be like, oh, I know what that is. Now that's the thing that's unique about black gospel. There are a lot of chord movements that are used extensively across multiple songs. So understanding black gospel, meaning you got to understand the lingos, those harmonic lingos, which boils down to just studying those song qualities, studying those chords, right? And then you're going to start hearing them in song. But the devices used, especially when it comes to transcription, it is no different, right? One caveat I'll add to this is that it's important to listen to songs that's within your comfort zone. Because one of the problems why people think this old concept of transcription is impossible is they're listening way outside their zone. If you've never done transcriptions before, if you've never really played by ear like that before, you can't then go listen to the most baddest songs with the craziest chords and run and expect to make sense of it. It's gonna just fly way over your head. You gotta notch things down a bit to a level, listen to something that is within your comfort zone, be like, okay, I feel like I could figure this out. And then the more of those transcriptions you do, the easier it gets, and then you can start to increase the quality of songs that you're transcribing, the more complexity. But you can't just go, I'm going to transcribe the most crazy stuff with all the runs. It's going to be discouraging. Start simple, start slow. Right? Malik says, how do you use the blues scales in your playing with the chords? So I was just demonstrating right away. The beauty about the blues scales is that you use the blues scales predominantly on dominant 7 chords. Now, when we talk about the uses of scales, I like to think of the uses of scales as spices in the kitchen, right? So if you're trying to make barbecue chicken, you don't decide you're going to add curry powder to it or sweet and sour sauce or, you know, something obscure. No, because you don't add that to barbecue chicken. It's going to mess it up. We have to think about scales and chords in these contexts as spices. So if I'm playing something CCM, you know, just a nice, something CCM worshipfully, I can't and then just go start throwing blue scales in that. That's gonna be like throwing curry powder in your barbecue chicken. It's gonna ruin it because it's not in the style, right? So you have to be careful where you use these stuff. So I only use blue scales on stuff that already has a bluesy undertone. Like if we're doing Jesus, walk with me. Oh, Jesus, walk with me while I'm on my journey. I want Jesus to walk with me. So that old school clap hand, straight blues scales, because most of the chords that I'm using are dominant 7 chords. And whenever you find a song that leans more towards dominant 7 chords, blues scale is your baby right there. You can run blues scale all over the place. If it's a CCM song, there are certain spots you may be able to use some blues scales, but very carefully. Again, it's like the spices in the kitchen. You want this sauce to have a little bit of kick, but you don't want it to be scorching peppery. So you gotta taper that pepper, right? Just a little pinch of pepper. So it's the same thing with music. That's why we have genres and styles. Certain chords, certain scales is going to point to certain style. And so you have to understand, what style am I currently playing? And that's going to influence what scale to use. So for CCM, I err more towards the pentatonic scale. You can get away with that on almost any CCM song. Blues scale's a bit more aggressive, right? So that's kind of how I approach the song and the scale and chordal usage, in songs. Same way how you'd use, do I use major seventh or dominant seventh? Because each of those chords are like polar or opposite in terms of the effect they give. You want something more R&B neo soul? We go for the major seventh chords, major nines, right? Gives you more modern R&B style. We do the same thing with dominant seventh chord. It does not give the same effect. So that's why we have to understand music from a stylistic perspective, because that's part of the device we use to separate styles, is how we use chords and how we use scales. For those who are just joining, Christmas giveaway, giving away 4 $25 gift cards to a lucky winner. All you got to do is submit for the raffle. The more submissions you make, the higher your chance of winning. We have 13 minutes remaining before the raffle closes. How do you enter? Here's the link again in the description. Click on that and just go through the process, and maybe you'll win, right? Let's check out a few more questions. Question from Dude. Dude says, any advice for writing or catchy effective motif in the scene of beat production, or would be over a drone 808 based as opposed to a chord progression, and for the most part in Aeolian scale? That's a very specific, detailed advice, and unfortunately this is a bit outside of my wheelhouse. I want to say over the last 10 years, I've dedicated my sort of mental capacity to just teaching. My job, every day I get up, is how do I make things simpler for people to understand, musically, theoretically, so that they can eventually play like me. And so that's where I've sort of been focusing my attention for the last 10 years or so, not necessarily on composition and songwriting. So that's I want to say a dormant skill, or it's a skill that I haven't exercised a lot. As it relates to catchy motif, that's a wide range, because what is catchy? Catchy is going to be in the eyes of the beholder or the ears of the listener, because there's so many things that can be categorized as catchy. My recommendation would be to study already produced music in that style that you're interested in. So for those of you who are interested in rap, beat making, pull up beats from some of the baddest beat creators around the world and study them. That's how I learned. When I wanted to learn about what gospel music was or gospel chords and style, pull up some of the baddest gospel songs and keyboard players and just study what they're doing. Oh, so that's how they use those chords. Oh, cool. Because, the old saying is, there's no need to recreate the wheel, right? And so when we study people that already are crushing it, doing well, it inspires us. We get ideas based on what they've already done that we can add, right? So again, because that's not something I'm actively studying and doing, it's kind of outside of my wheelhouse. But I do know if that's something I was interested in, that's how I would approach it. Pull up some of the best beat players, and I'm pretty sure you know a few already, because if this is something you're into, you've probably come across a few guys. Just see what they're doing. Be a fly on the wall. And the beauty about the internet right now, everybody got their stuff out on the internet, YouTube tutorials, Spotify. Study that stuff. Hear the sounds they're using. Hear their melodic motifs. Hear how they're using instrumentations. Hear how they're, especially in the realm of beat making, there's so much stuff that's happening in the box, meaning how they utilize EQ and compression and side chains and the different instrumentation, all of that stuff. With electronic music, post-production to get that sound that goes beyond the scope of just instrument playing. Gotta do a deep dive into that stuff. And that's how you'll start to learn what makes that kind of music popular, which will start to influence your own writing ability with motif and that stuff. All right? Good stuff though, good question. Music Pro School said, what chords are commonly used in jazz? At this day and age, there is no commonly used chords in jazz. If you're talking about a period in jazz, like 1950s jazz, then we talk about, I mean, even then jazz music was there's so many things happening. So here's what I would recommend to you, Music Pro School. If you want to sort of do a deep dive study into what's common in jazz, you got to get a hold of some real books. You know, the real books that sort of like the jazz standards. Get a hold of those and study the chord progressions. See those commonly used chord progressions, because you know there's so many different ones. I can't say it's a 1-6-2-5 or because jazz music is more complex than that. But to get an understanding of what jazz progressions are, start with the real books, and start to study those standards, and then you'll start to see a pattern. I don't play a lot of jazz anymore. I mean, even back then, I don't consider myself a jazzer. I have learned jazz theory and I've learned a few jazz standards, but I'm not really a jazz pianist. And I don't study jazz tunes like that. But again, if I were to decide I want to go deeper into jazz concept, the real book is where I would start. And this page, I think there's over like 1,000 jazz standards. And you learn a lot about how they utilize chord progressions, but also how they write jazz melodies for vocal lines and horn lines and stuff like that. Great place to study. Good. A question from sorry, I'm trying to get this right. Odebayo, I think that's the name. Says my question is, what brings uniqueness in playing the keyboard? Is it by knowing the theory or by knowing the different musicians? So uniqueness definitely comes from a level of understanding, right? Every musician who plays well has to understand a certain level of theory. That's just not something we can skate around. When you see me playing, I'm not choosing my chords by random. I'm not choosing my licks by random. It's all coming from an understanding of what's happening. Where am I going to next? Why am I making this chord dominant 7? Why am I making it 13th? Why am I using this passing chords? There's a reason behind every decision I'm making. And I can come up with these reasons based on experience and an understanding of the theory behind music. So this is why I emphasize everybody got to learn theory, regardless of what style of music you're interested in. Because when you know the theory, it helps you to make more strategic decisions. Now, also remember that we all have personal tastes. Just like how we like different types of food, that's a taste that you develop over time, right? You give a 2-year-old something, he eats anything. My son is 2.5 right now, and he's starting to formulate a certain taste at that early. Certain foods that he used to eat, he doesn't like it anymore. Certain food that he never liked to eat, now he likes. He's starting to figure out what he likes, what his palate likes. He's formulating his own taste based on food. Music is no different. Most of us already have a certain taste in the type of music we like, the type of chord progressions we like, right? And so when you combine that musical taste with your understanding of theory and harmony, it's going to start influence that uniqueness in your own playing. So that's what the uniqueness comes from. When I was learning piano, just starting out, I was trying to copy everybody under the sun. If it sounded good, I would try to copy it. And by copying all those different people and learning all these different chords and songs, what happens? My own musical taste starts to develop. And just like a chicken bursting out of the shell, I start to shed certain things, and my own sort of musical taste starts to come forward. And so now when I play, I have a certain sound. I have a certain way, certain runs, certain way I play chords. All of those things, that's sort of like subconscious things that's happening. Just like how when each of us talk, we speak with a different inflection, even if we're speaking the same language. We speak in a different tonal register. We speak with a different inflection. We even pronounce certain words differently. We speak with a different cadence. All of those things you never really worked on individually, right? No, you didn't. It just kind of formulates over time. And so the more you learn about music, that uniqueness, that personalized sound, it's going to come. And so that's why I tell people, don't worry about this personalization. It's unavoidable. The more you learn, the more it's going to influence your own musical taste and musical sound. And so it doesn't matter how hard you try, you will never be able to sound like me or like the other keyboard player you hear. You're going to sound like you, which is cool. Because if everybody sounded the same, music would just be boring. We need those uniqueness. And that uniqueness comes more the more information you absorb about theory, about harmony, the more songs you study, the more transcriptions you do. All of those things is going to help to form this solid foundation of your musical style and taste. Your background also has a lot to do with that. Like guys that grew up in Nigeria, Ghana, the type of music that's culturally to you is going to influence the way you play. I was born and raised in Jamaica. Jamaican folk music, Jamaican island music influenced the way I play today. But also because I spent 9 years studying classical piano, that also influenced my playing. So all of these things in my background influence how I play, which is why over time I've learned to embrace these unique life situations that helps me to make me. Great question, great question. So we got 2 more minutes before the submission for the raffle ends. And that link that I've been posting in the chat, once 3 o'clock comes, I think it's going to automatically select a winner or automatically select 4 winners. I don't remember. Because this is not being, I'm not the one choosing the winners. It's, I'm trying to see if I can find this page. Yeah, so we got 2 minutes and then it's going to suppose, I think it's going to select 4 winners. We got 1 minute and 55 seconds. Let's see if I can take one more questions between now and then. All right. Author says, I understand tritone substitution. However, I find it hard to make it sound good when applying it to songs. And so this is one of the problems that a lot of people have. Understanding the concept and then making that concept sounding good. You know, it's a common problem for a lot of us when we're just learning these things. How do we make this, how do we take this theoretical knowledge that we've acquired and then turn it into practical stuff that sound good? So author, what I'd recommend is check out some of my more advanced tutorial and see how I use these concepts. Because a lot of the times it's not what you're playing, it's how you're playing it, right? So I might tell you that you can use a D flat 7 to resolve the C as a tritone sub if you're doing a 1-6-2-5. But how are you playing it? What voicing are you using? How are you approaching it rhythmically and melodically? These are other elements that changes based on the song. Where's the timing that you're putting in this chord? So if I'm playing Amazing Grace, then. So see, I just throw that tritone in there, but listen how I lead into it melodically and rhythmically. And The tricky thing about this is because it changes from song to song. And so it's finding that sweet spot that works, right? And so unfortunately, author, I can't tell you that do this and every time you use a tritone substitution, it will work. Because it's going to be different from song to song. And so the best way to start to understand how this works is, again, to study. At this point, I have dozens, especially in my membership program, dozens of songs. All have advanced versions demonstrating tritone substitution, modal mixture, diminished passing, minor chromatic passing, and I show you them on popular songs. By popular, I mean popular gospel songs, hymns. I show you how to reharm the hell out of it, so to speak, and still make it sound good. You know, once we get to this level of reharmonization and substitution, we have to spend a lot more time studying what other people have done that worked. And that's going to give us ideas as to, okay, so this is how I use it more effectively. Because like I said, knowing it and using it, it's different. And it's going to change from song to song. Okay, it's 3:02. Let me hop over to this browser and see if winners are selected yet. Okay, the winners haven't been picked yet, which means I have to pick the winner. Anyway, I'll have to do that when the stream ends. But if you were selected as one of the 4 winners, I'm going to send you an email with details. Why? Because I'm going to need to send you an Amazon gift card that is local to your country. So if you're in India and you're one of the winners, I'm going to need to buy you an Amazon gift card from India's Amazon. So Amazon India, basically, because there's different Amazon for different regions of the world. I can't just buy you one from the US. It won't work. So it's very important that you keep an eye on your email for the next 24 hours because I'm going to reach out to you for details, which is why once you've entered the raffle giveaway, it's going to send you an email for you to confirm your email. Make sure you confirm your email because if not, you can't be selected as one of the winners. So I'm going to just select 4 people with the highest entries, which means they have liked, they've subscribed, they've shared, they've done everything. Each time you do one of those tasks, it increases your entries. So I'm going to pick the 4 people with the highest entry in a few minutes, and then I'm going to send you an email. Be sure to reply to that email. People who I don't hear from, in 24 hours, I'm going to go down the line and pick the next person. And then I'm going to send you a gift card. Let's take a few more questions. This is fun. And again, pardon me with my coughing and my cough drops, you know. This time of year, my allergies act up. So this keeps it at bay. Let's take a few more questions. You guys are coming with some really good questions. I like that. I like that. I like that. So Simone says, I would like to add some substance to my solos, but I don't know how to harmonize properly my melody with sixth, fourths, fifth. So before we can get into solos, you really got to learn melody harmonization because, you know, improv comes from that. So if I'm playing, man, it's always hard for me to think of songs. Let's start with As the Deer. I mean, a lot of you know As the Deer. Let's go to the key of F. Woo! That was my rough version. But you notice right throughout the song, you could hear the chords clearly, and you can hear the melody clearly. Now you also notice I wasn't always playing sixth and thirds and fifth with the melody, because playing chords with melody simply means you're adding the melody to the chord. Sometimes I'm playing single notes, sometimes I'm playing it in thirds, sometimes in sixths. Now I can do that with flexibility and ease because this is something I've been doing for over a decade. But you first have to approach this with the understanding that there's no one way to play chords with melody, right? You don't always have to harmonize the melody in this hand, sixths and thirds and fourths, because that can be restrictive. You don't always have to play a full chord in your left hand. You don't always have to play a single note. There is no one way. So approach it with an open mind. As long as you can keep the chords and the melody going, that's the most important thing. When it comes to improv, make sure that whatever stuff you're doing is based on the key and the chord. So if I'm improvising over as the deer, so I'm not playing melody, just improvise. Up here, I'm singing the song. I know where I am every step of the way. I know what chord's coming next. What's happening here in the right hand is based on the key I'm in, which is F, and the chord I'm playing at that time. So if I'm playing as a deer, if I play that diminish, I know I have some options. I can play diminished arpeggios. I could play a scale based on that. Now, one of the most important thing, and my teacher used to say this, my teacher used to say the most important thing when you're improvising is your starting note and your ending note. In between, sometimes you can play fluff. Your ending note must either be based on the chord you're playing or the chord you're going to. So in this case, I know I'm going to A7, so I make sure I'm hitting a diatonic note of that A7. So every time the chord changes in my left hand, you got to make sure that whatever note you're playing matches. It's a diatonic note of that chord. And that's what helps to keep your solos in check. That's what helps to keep it uniform and sounding good. You can't just be playing random stuff, right? And so you taper your runs and your licks and your arpeggios and stuff to make sure that it's staying within the key, or even if you use some chromatic notes, that it's resolving properly. Resolving properly meaning you're resolving to a chord tone that you're on. Great question. Man, things just jumped. Question from Fred or Galana says, how do I easily use extensions in songs without thinking? Well, first of all, we are always thinking. Everything I do, I'm thinking about it. But I understand what you're saying. I'm just messing with you. You're meaning without too much thought. Where we do things like when you're walking, you don't really think about left, right. You know, your foot just moves. That's what we call the subconscious. You're not really conscious about it, but it's just kind of operating in the background. So before you can do anything at that stage where it's just, you don't have to put much thought to it, you have to have put in the work extensively before you get to that stage. There is no, I just jump from not knowing something to not having to think much about it. There's a big gap called woodshedding, putting in the work. For years, I practiced extensions. 1, 6, 2, 5. 1, 6, 2, 5. Or 3, 6, 2, 5. Or 1, 4, 5, 1, 7, 6. You know what I'm talking about? Progression practice has to become a part of your regimen. At this point, I think I have 5 different courses. I have one for triads for beginners, one for sevenths for intermediate, then I got one for ninths, 11ths, and extensions for the advanced player. And it's a regiment course that goes through 6 different progressions in all 12 keys. I call it a regiment because it's an exercise. Because part of this flexibility to play chords without much thought is it has to be in the muscle memory. How does it get in the muscle memory? Through hours and hours of regimental practice. Now, when I say hours, I'm not talking about in one day. I'm talking about over the course of 2-3 years, you would have accumulated hours of practice. But if the guy's not actively practicing progressions regularly, triads, sevenths, ninths, 11ths, it's not going to become a part of your vocabulary where you can just whip it out and use it with ease. There's a reason why we always associate the words vocabulary with chords and scales, because it's just like a language. When you're speaking, if you're learning a new language, the reason why you're not able to communicate as clearly as a native speaker is because you don't have the vocabulary yet. What is phone in Spanish, or mouse, or computer, or keyboard? Those are words that helps to form vocabulary. I don't know what any of those are, so I can't even begin to give you a first sentence in Spanish. But if you want to learn a new language, you first have to start learning the name of things, and then you have to practice those till it becomes a part of the vocabulary. Then you start to practice sentences, which is what we call progressions. How do I then use these items in a sentence? How do I use these chords in a progression? So you practice little phrases in that new language. And that's how you develop the vocabulary. Then you can start having a conversation with someone. So because I have an extensive vocabulary of chords and inversions, when I'm playing, I don't have to think about my extended chords because it's at the tip of my tongue at any given moment. Vocabulary. But I can remember the day when it wasn't there, and so I had to stop and think, what is A13th again? Oh, what is D minor 9? You kind of have to think about, but after a while, that thinking period gets shorter and shorter till there's no time. As soon as you think of a chord, your hands know exactly where to go. I know I'm giving you guys a hard way, but trust me, if there was a shortcut to this thing, I would have found it already because I've been searching for over a decade. I've been playing piano for almost 20 years now. And I'm always looking for shortcut and stuff. Everything. You ask my wife. If there's a short way of doing something, I know it. I'm always looking for short ways, shortcut. How can I take this and minimize it to that? And while there's some shortcuts in music, most of it is just putting in the work. The beauty about it, if you start today, if you start now, Make a pact with yourself. Hey, 2022 is a few days away, right? 2022, I'm going to start doing regular, consistent practicing. By the end of the year, you're going to blow yourself away just how much you've learned, how much vocabulary you've developed, right? But a lot of the stuff that you guys are struggling with, how do I do this? How do I sound good? How do I add spice to my playing? How do I add interest to my playing? All of those things comes from vocabulary. And just like how when, again, you're learning a new language and you have a limited vocabulary, you stutter. You have to stop and think, what's that word again? You can't really form fluent sentences because you don't have the vocabulary yet. It's the same thing in music. So if you're playing and you're stuttering or you're trying to do some stuff and it doesn't come out well, it's because the vocabulary is limiting. And that's not a bad thing. It just means you got to sharpen those skills more. And if you don't know where to start, I already got a roadmap mapped out for you. Courses, quizzes, everything that shows you exactly what you need to do because there's a lot to get through. This is why I tell people, hey, learning piano by ear is synonymous to becoming vegan or vegetarian. Or if you want to lose 100 pounds. All of these things that I'm talking about, vegan, vegetarianism, losing weight, these are lifestyle changes. You don't just change your diet for a week or two. Nah, it's a new world, baby. It's a lifestyle change. And learning piano or learning music by ear, you have to treat it as a lifestyle. This is something I now do. I'm a musician because it's going to take some time. People ask me, how long would it take me to get from here to here? I don't know because it's based on you. How hard do you want this? The harder you work at it, the quicker you'll see results. But there's no way myself or anyone can predict and tell you you're going to be able to do this in 6 months or learn it in 6 months. It could take 6 months, it could take shorter, or it could take longer, because a huge part of that process is going to be based on how hard you work at this thing. But one thing I do know, if you're consistent, that's going to be the most important thing. It doesn't matter how much days a week you practice, how much hours a day you practice. Yes, those things make a difference in how fast you progress. But what's most important is the continuation, the long haul. You got to be ready to commit 2, 3, 4 years of consistent investment. Like I said, I've been at this thing for 20 years and I'm still at it, still learning new things. Can you believe it? Yes, I still do learn new things, new ways of playing certain chords, new licks. Because music is a bottomless hole. There's so much to learn. And you don't have to want to go all the way. You don't have to want to become a crazy advanced player. But if you want to break through the beginner's barrier, it's going to take a good 2, 3 years of investment. And yes, it's an investment, time, energy, resources. Because once you break through beginner, baby, you'll never go back to beginner, even if you take a year off. I don't practice as much as I used to, but I still maintain my skills. You get to a level where you just don't fall below that level anymore. Anyway, let's take a few more questions. I got 10 minutes. But great question, though. Great question. Great question. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get through all these questions as always, but I'll try to get through the ones that I can at least answer live. Fred says diminish to major chords. We generally don't resolve a diminished chord to a major chord. Diminished chords 90% of the time is resolved to a minor chord, right? So you always do stuff like, if I'm going from 3 to 6. And we do that in, you can do that in as the there. When we go, let me see here. You alone are my heart, desire and I long to worship. right? We can go diminished passing to get to 6. You alone are my strength, my shield. You alone does my spirit ease. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. So, most of the times diminish resolves to minor, not major. There are places that you can resolve to a major, like when we're playing old school gospel and you see me do. That's a diminished resolving to a major, but it doesn't resolve in root position. It resolves with the 5 in the bass. So there's some few spots, but if you're just getting into diminished passing, practice them on resolution to minor. I have an entire course on diminished passing on my website. And I do have a few tutorials here too that talks about diminished passing on YouTube. Okay. Merry Christmas, Stephen Jones. Question says, is it always necessary to solo while playing the main chord of a song? No. Soloing or improvisation is an optional thing. You can play an entire song without having to play a single run. It's not mandatory. It's a spicy technique. We use it to add interest and spice and contrast to songs. Right? So it's just an improvisatory tool, but it's not mandatory, right? And I only recommend people do stuff like that if they understand what they're doing. Definitely something you should be practicing if you're at that stage, but it's important to know that, especially when you're playing by ear, nothing is mandatory. It's all about preference and taste and style, right? So I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat asking about tritone sub. And I do have quite a few tutorials on tritone subs right here on YouTube. Just type in tritone sub piano lesson with Warren or tritone substitution. I have a lot of tutorials. Or if you just go to my playlists and go to the advanced playlist, virtually every tutorial in the advanced playlist has some version or explanation about reharm and tritone subs and all of that. Because it's a deep concept, and it's better if you check out a tutorial that was designed to explain that fully, which I do have, than me trying to demonstrate here, because it's just going to eat up the remaining 6 minutes that I have. Right? So for those of you who want to know about tritone sub, check that out. So a question says, how do I use chord substitution in Great Is Thy Faithfulness? There's a lot of places you can use it. That's one. Here's a part for the diminished passing. Woo! You can tell I'm making this up on the spot. Woo. Here you go. So I'm spontaneous reharming. So you can see I would need to work out the kinks some more, but that was, a spontaneous reharm. I wanted to just show you, even if I was spontaneously doing this, how I'm thinking about using passing chords. But it's still based on these concepts. For those of you who've been following me for a while, probably hear me talk about 7 types of passing chords. If you memorize those 7 passing chords, the concepts, and be able to do them in any key, you're going to be able to realize that you can spontaneously reharm most songs using those concepts. Obviously, if I play around with this for a bit, I can come up with more chord ideas and runs. But that's the best I could do for you all on the fly. All right. All right, I could take one more question. Who's going to be the lucky person? So a question says, when do you know if it's time to move on from a concept? Simple. Do you know it inside, out, back, forward, upside down? That's when it's time to move on. There's certain concepts or there's certain things that gets better over time, like scales. I always tell people, don't fall into this trap trying to perfect one scale, right? Like, you never move on from the major scale because you're trying to play that major scale as fast as possible. No, that's a waste of time. Because the more you practice your major scale over time, that's how you get better. So once you can play your major scale to a certain level, move on to other scales. Still practice that major scale, but make sure that you're learning other scales. But for concepts like passing chords, diminished passing, substitution, drop twos, all of those conceptual stuff, those you kind of hammer out till it becomes just something you can do instantly. That's when it's time to move on. If you have to stop and think about a 2-5-1 passing before doing it, that means you don't know it well enough yet. So still hammer it out. Yeah? So that's how you know when to move on from a concept. All right, y'all. So that's all the time we got for today. Man, this was fun. 2022, I'm going to try to see if I could do more live streams because these are so much more fun just to be able to chat with you guys and hear questions, hear where your mindset's at, but also get to answer questions that I probably would have never come across to shoot in a tutorial. So, Christmas is a few days away. I want to send my Christmas greetings to all of you and your family. Man, it's been a tremendous year. It's also been a rough year, with just everything that we all know happening around the world. So for those of you who may have lost loved ones in this pandemic or just to natural state of life, I send my condolences. I hope you can have a wonderful Christmas, blessed New Year. 2022 is going to be an amazing year, because let's will it into action, right? 2022 is going to be a better year financially, musically, everything. Let's put it in the atmosphere. Let's not only put in the atmosphere, but let's prepare the mind for it, right? We got to be mentally ready to accept the blessing that the Lord has in store for us. Excuse me. For those of you who have submitted for the raffle giveaway, thank you. Unfortunately, I can only pick 4 winners. For those 4 winners, make sure you check your email. Everybody who submit, make sure that you check your email. Make sure that you verified your email with the automated email that would have sent to you after you submitted. Because if you can't be a winner if your email was not verified. And I just want to say, hey, for those of you who feel like you haven't made any progress at all in your piano playing in 2021, remember, as long as there's life, there's hope, right? As long as you keep getting back up, there's a chance to do something different. 2022 is around the corner. Start thinking about what you can do differently to ensure progress. Because progress only stops when you stop. So keep at this thing. Music is a lifestyle. It's a change in the mindset. It's not a chore. It's not a task. You got to become the music. Music's got to be a thing you eat, live, sleep, breathe. That's me. Music is who I am. And that's how I got to where I am. 20 years, all I've done is just consume music. And so for me, it doesn't feel like work. It's something I enjoy. Yes, it's hard at times, but I try not to let the frustration get to me. Put in the work, and I guarantee you, you'll see the results. It's not about gifts. It's not about talent. The people who rise to the cream of the top are the people who put in the work, people who put in the practice. Eventually, everything becomes clearer. Music is not a mystery. I used to think it was a mystery that only some people got the gift of music and blah. I realized, nah, it's the people who put in the time, the work, the energy that will see the results. All right? So for 2022, y'all put on your work hat and get ready to put in the work. For those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, but also make sure that you dive into the hundreds of video tutorials that's already right here on YouTube. And for those of you who have consumed all of that and looking for more, especially more direction and guidance, pianolessonwithwarren.com is a wonderful community for gospel musicians. I've poured hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars into that program. When you hear me talk about pianolessonwithwarren.com, that membership program, it is way different than YouTube. YouTube is where I post the free resources, the paid stuff, the gold mine stuff. The thing that's going to transform your playing exists over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. And the most important thing that exists over there is the structure. And that's what most of you are missing, structure. Because we can't consume all of this in one day, not even in 1 year. You need to do things in bite-sized bits, and you need to do them in a structured order. And that's the most important thing we provide for you at Piano Lesson with Warren, structure. And the structure allows you to see progress faster because you're not wasting time focusing on things that's not going to make a difference in your playing. All right? Keep listening, keep singing, keep practicing, y'all, and we'll talk soon. All right? Bye for now.